morning. My name is Rachel Carruthers, and I am the events manager here at the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for joining us this morning for the second installment of our second season of Ideas, our Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Advancement series. Ideas is a virtual DEI training series hosted by the Portland Regional Chamber of Commerce in partnership with Visit Portland. This second season, presented by Springborn Staffing, will cover various areas of DEI training in an effort to help business owners and employees create welcoming workplaces. The Chamber continues to collaborate with the Portland region's business community to facilitate programs, initiatives, and provide resources to make our region welcoming to all. Our Ideas series is a great result of that work. Season 1 was focused on providing vital racial equity training that covered inclusive language and workplace policies, to diversity recruiting and the process of appropriately completing an equity assessment of an organization or company. Following that very successful inaugural season in spring 2024, the Chamber and its partners reached out to the business community for input and found that there was more work to be done. This season, we've expanded our training to include other areas of essential DEI training, such as LGBTQ+ awareness, ageism in the workplace, neurodiversity, and much more. We've also been able to expand our reach, partnering with Visit Portland and Springborn Staffing, both of which have expressed their shared passion for providing free and accessible resources to all those looking to expand their DEI training, thus fostering a healthier workplace and a healthier workforce that is welcoming to all throughout the region. Today's topic, Ageism in the Workplace, Engaging Older Workers as Workplace Assets, is presented by Noël Bonam, State Director of AARP Maine. Having extensive experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion practice and civic leadership, among many other things, Noël will lead an interactive session on current and emerging workforce trends on a variety of topics that relate to workers 50 and over. Guests will leave today's training having learned more about what older workers seek through employment opportunities and how to engage older adults in a more meaningful and effective manner at the workplace. We'll also walk away understanding more about reskilling and upskilling among the 50+ and what that means to an employer. Now, like all the Chamber's virtual signature events, today's presentation is free, will be recorded, and made available for free replay on the Chamber's website and YouTube page. To keep up to date on all the Chamber's news and events, please visit our website, portlandregion.com. Check out our events page and sign up for our weekly email newsletter while you're there. Also, follow us on social media for real-time updates as well. Links to socials can be found at the bottom of our homepage at portlandregion.com. Before we begin today's program, I just want to remind everyone that we're using a platform called StreamYard. This platform provides improved production and interactive elements that truly enhance virtual events. On that note, I'd like to point out that when you have questions for our presenter today, you can type them in the YouTube chat throughout the presentation. Noël will answer questions when appropriate throughout his presentation and will also reserve time at the end of his presentation for a Q&A session with everyone here this morning. So please do engage with us in the chat during today's training. At this point, I'd like to introduce Ken DeSimone, President of Springborn Staffing, our Ideas season-long sponsor.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ken DeSimone, President of Springborn Staffing in Portland. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute honor to sponsor this important webinar series on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. At Springborn, we see firsthand how diverse teams drive innovation, improve performance, and create more meaningful connections with customers and communities. As the oldest state in the nation, with nearly 40% of our population aged 50 and over, it's a vitally important topic for both employers and employees, and one very close to home for all of us at Springborn Staffing. It's an issue many of our clients have faced. We're really excited to hear from today's speaker, Noël Bonam, State Director of AARP Maine, on emerging workforce trends that impact workers 50 and over. From all of us at Springborn Staffing, thank you so much for being here, and let's make the most of today's opportunity to learn, share, and act for a better, more inclusive future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. Now, I don't want to take any more time away from Noël this morning, so with that, I'll hand things over to him. Noël, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for having me. And Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm particularly delighted and feel good about having this particular conversation because I think it is a very important one. Not only because we live in the oldest state in the nation, that, and not only because we have a fairly large older population in our state, but also because I think it's an important conversation because we do not think about older as adults as a key player in the workforce, generally speaking, and that we don't see them as a vital part of the workforce. And I think there's a missed opportunity there. And I'm hoping that we could have a conversation today and about why that is and how we can change that. And this is very much meant to be an interactive conversation. So I will go through my slides, and if there are any questions that come up, please pop them in the comment section. And if I miss them, I believe Rachel and Riley will help highlight those for me, but I'll try to keep an eye on the comment section. Like Rachel mentioned, if you have a question, if you want to add a comment while during the presentation, please put your comment or question in the comment section in StreamYard, and I think that will help kind of bring the question forward. All right, so let's get started. To begin with, what I'd like to do is I'd like to get a quick sense of who's here and what is it that you're hoping to get from today's session. So those of you who are maybe not on your phone, but are on your laptop, please uh, put in your first name and your goal for um, today's session, and the location you're signing in from as well. Your first name, the town you're in, and your personal goal for today's session. What is it that you're hoping to achieve? What is it that you're hoping to learn? So while you do that, let me just kind of quickly clarify what it is that we are going to cover, that I'm going to cover today, when it within the context of engaging older workers as workplace assets. One, I'd like for us to be able to discuss what it means to understand the contributions, challenges, and particularly the engagement strategies of older adults in the workforce, and also to highlight the importance of older adults in the workforce. Why is it important? How does that play out? And what what are the things that we have to keep in mind as we engage older adults? And the last one is addressing ageism in the workplace, and we may all see that, um, or we may not see it just in the workplace. We see it out and about in the society. We kind of, we'll, at the later stage, I'll kind of cover what ageism really looks like and how it manifests in the society, both in our personal worlds and in the workforce. So, so these are the three things we will cover and today. And if there's anything else in particular that you're hoping that we could touch on, again, put it in the comment section, and I will try to respond, especially if I'm aware of it or can answer that question. So I'm going to take a quick look at who's here. There are folks from a lot of different places, which is really nice to see. And those will keep popping in there as I kind of go through this the slideshow. So let me go to the next one. In terms of the demographic shifts in Maine, I feel like I need to start this presentation by giving you some hard data as to who's here, what does that look like, what do our demographics look like, and why this conversation is really important for us to have employers, as people that work within the workforce. And so let's start with demographic shifts in Maine. Maine has the oldest median age in the U.S. And actually New England has, collectively has the oldest median age in the U.S. And then within New England, Maine has the oldest median age of 44.8 years. 23% of Maine's population is 60 and older. There's over 400,000 older adults who are 60 and older in the state. That's a significant uh, part of our community, part of our state. Then there's been a significant growth within the age groups, 22.8% increase in the 75 to 79 age cohort, and 16.5 rise in the 80 to 84 age cohort from 2020 to 2023. And that is a significant increase. We also know that we are living longer now than we have ever done. Average life is we're living over 42 years longer than we have done, like say in 1800, where the average age used to be 31, and now it's 73. And we know that in the next 35 years, they will be the largest age demographic in the nation would be those, who are living between the ages of 85 and 104. That's the fastest growing age demographic. That should kind of set the context for this conversation. Then, in terms of labor force participation rates, the share of Maine's workforce age 65 and older grew from 6.9% in 2000 between 2013 and 17 to about 8.2 between 2018 and 2024. So that's a positive thing. At least I think it's a positive thing. And from 2017 to 22, nearly 42% of individuals aged 65 and 66, and 32% of those aged 67 and 68 remained in the labor force. What that's really telling us is that people are also working longer. A few years ago, AARP had done some research to see, what were people thinking in terms of retirement. When were they hoping to retire in terms of an age? When I got to 65, I'm going to retire, or by 60, I want to retire. And this and the poll and the survey showed that people were actually working longer than they had intended. So a lot of people, if they thought they were going to retire at 60 or 65, they were actually working a few years longer before they really felt comfortable to kind of actually retire, quote unquote, retire. And so you can also see that in the statistics that I'm sharing with you right now. In the labor force, there's about 260,000 adults who are 50 plus in our state, and there are about 73,000 adults who are 65 and older. And if you keep in mind that the age demographic, people in our state who are 60 and older is about 400,000, and there's about 70, let's say close to 75,000 people in that cohort that's within the workforce. In terms of economic contributions, older adults contribute to the workplace diversity and mentorship. And this is something that I will come back to in terms of mentorship and what that means for an older worker and for an employer that facilitates that, or kind of really has something in place that leverages that opportunity. Older adults also make workforce help meet workforce demands and skill shortages. We saw during the pandemic, it's a great example where there weren't enough people to fill the jobs that we needed in our state. And a lot of older adults, some of them came back because they needed that extra money. There was a lot of uncertainty around the pandemic and what was going to happen. A lot of them found themselves more available than before because they were not traveling, and they felt like they could be doing something while they were staying at home. Others did it for a whole host of other reasons, but they can meet the workforce shortages and kind of demand across the nation, but definitely in our state. On the flip side, 70% of US employers report having difficulties filling jobs due to lack of technical skills of candidates. And now we're talking specifically about um, 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 not just older adults, but all candidates across the board. Lack of professional competencies such as teamwork, problem solving, and time management, and just not having enough people, the lack of candidates to apply for jobs. And this can have a direct impact on the economy. This can have a direct impact on employers, and therefore it can have a direct impact on how the economic system, the economic framework within the state operates. And I'll go to the next slide. Before I go to the next slide, I'm going to just stop for a second, and I just call out a few things that people have mentioned in the comment section. One person's really looking at hoping to understand what appropriate upskilling means, and that is a really wonderful term, upskilling, which is it's kind of been surfacing a fair amount the past few years, and it really is a very important thing when it comes to hiring people for jobs. Any employer would do really well if they could facilitate upskilling of their recruits, of the upskilling of their current employees, existing employees. And what upskilling really means at the end of the day is making sure that the skills of the employee, the recruit, and like I said, I want to make sure, and I want to re-emphasize this again, it's not only about the person you're hiring kind of new to the job, but also someone who could be in the job and could have been in the job or has been in the job for 10, 12, 15, 20 years. Upskilling is very important because you're helping them to kind of learn the relevant skills so that they can actually be successful at the jobs that they're doing, and to get to hone their skills, to upgrade their skill set, and all of that kind of broadly means upskilling, and that's very, very important. Another participant says they want to make sure that we're being inclusive, and that they recognize what is important to their more mature employees. We'll talk a lot more about that in a bit. And then another participant is hoping that has a question rather. How can a younger workforce be educated on the advantages of leveraging an experienced associate? And I think that is a really good one too, and that really has to do with the culture that the employer develops, the culture that the employer celebrates and highlights, and just how it's incorporated in the workforce culture, I think, is what I would say. And I will actually talk about it. There's a slide that much later where I'll kind of talk about what employers can do, and that this is one of the things that we'll address there. And then another participant is really hoping to be able to identify some blind spots, and that is a really big one, because when you talk about ageism just doesn't exist in the workplace. It exists, everywhere in the society, and if you are in some parts of the world, in let's say India or China, the older you get, the more revered you are. People listen to you. The more respected you are, the more involved you are. People actually come to you seeking your input, your opinion on matters. And then in other parts of the world, like in the US, maybe, not maybe, but in the US, we don't necessarily do that. We within the workforce, I think after when a person reaches a certain age, we expect people to kind of disappear or not, or we don't think that they have enough skills. We don't think that they are able to contribute the same way they did earlier, and so that kind of culture exists. It's pervasive. It exists everywhere. It exists in how we treat not only our employees, but sometimes how we treat our older relatives, how we get treated as older adults by our relatives, by our loved ones, by our friends, or even sometimes when we talk about ourselves, we kind of say things that really are quite ageist without even realizing that. So we will kind of touch on that as well. All right. In terms of going back to the slideshow, and move on to the next one here. Now, ageism and its impact on the workforce and in the workplace. Now, 2/3 of adults over 50 believe that older workers face discrimination in the workplace. And 90% of those who believe ageism exists say it is commonplace. Um, uh, mid 2024, AARP Maine did a statewide survey, a statewide poll on perspectives on aging, because we're really curious about what Mainers were thinking about ageism, what they were thinking about aging itself. And so we asked them a whole set of questions that range from, things that were connected to the workforce, things that were connected to attitudes in the community, and also things that they believed about themselves or their own individual perspectives on things. And it was really good that we did it, because it really reinforced some of the stuff we already knew, but we knew that we knew anecdotally or kind of heard randomly here and there. And this poll actually helped us understand um, that it's true, and that a lot of people out there, a lot of older adults, really are very aware of and have experienced ageism. So the next one, for this one, and kind of speaking of the survey I just mentioned, 69% say employers prefer younger workers. So as an older worker, if you believe that no one wants you just because you're not as young as you were once, or that that employers prefer younger workers, then that's actually going to prevent an older worker from even wanting to apply for a job. 57% agree that older workers are excluded from employment or promotion opportunities. And sorry, I'm getting a call right now. Um, and that is, again, it's prohibitive for someone. You're creating a perspective, you're creating an attitude within older adults that that they are not valued, and that they should not consider going back to the workforce or staying any longer within the workforce. 66% believe age discrimination exists in the workplace, and most point out that age bias begins in the 50s and 60s. And it's kind of really interesting to, and at a later stage, I'll share a slide that really looks at happiness and aging. As people age, what does that look like? And there's a kind of dip, around the 40 to 60 age, within the 40 to 60 age range. And this is kind of, again, telling, because 66% of people feel like that discrimination exists within the workforce, particularly when they're in their 50s and 60s. And there's something to be kind of explored further. But it tells you that as you're kind of transitioning from young adulthood and middle age to kind of what we call older adulthood, that things transition and people notice it. People notice how others are interacting with them, what kind of perceptions they have about them, just because they're in that transitional age group. And that also extends to employers, right? I mean, we ultimately become those who are in positions of power, or we are people that work within a workforce or within for an employer, and we then kind of take these attitudes with us. So if you're actually at the workplace and you are working with someone who's in their 50s and 60s, the question then is, what are you, what am I, what are we projecting subconsciously, and what are we telling these coworkers who are in their 50s and 60s? The next a piece of data is and this is not the perspective on aging Maine survey that I mentioned from 2024, but a 2019 national poll on ageism found that 82% of older workers experience one or more forms of everyday ageism in their day-to-day lives. 82%. That's significantly high. And so my question to you is, if you could please respond to this question in the comment section and say, what are you seeing? What are you witnessing around you? And what are you experiencing around you when it comes to ageism? How does it show up, not just in the workplace, but also in your personal life? So both from a personal and personnel perspective, what are some of the challenges you're experiencing? If you could just take a quick moment to respond in the comment section, that would be great. And while you do that, I'll go to the next slide and then come back to the comments in the comment section. Again, the prompt is, in case you didn't catch it, what are you seeing, witnessing, or experiencing around you around ageism or ageist attitudes within the workforce and in your personal lives? Okay, while you put your comments in the chat section, in the comment section, and I mentioned this earlier, and I said I'll come to this slide a little bit later. Ageism, there's systemic ageism, there is institutional ageism, there's interpersonal ageism, and there's internalized ageism. Now, I want to kind of make sure that we understand the difference between institutional ageism and systemic ageism. Institutional ageism was very specific to institutions and systems of power, whether it has to do with the corporate sector, whether it has to do with the public sector, but institutions at large. Systemic ageism, on the other side, is discrimination on the basis of age across a society. We do not let people do certain things because of their age. That could be a loved one and may not be realizing that they're actually being ageist. It could be suddenly we speak louder when we're speaking to an older adult, and that is ageist if the person actually is not hard of hearing. We may actually tell people that they may sit for a bit if they want to, just randomly, just because they're an older person, or you may assume that they may not be able to walk 12 miles a day. And there are all these assumptions that we make of people, and that kind of shows up in the workplace as well, where we specifically don't give older adults certain tasks, and thinking that they may not be able to do it, or that they might be too slow. Then there's internalized ageism. This is a really key one, and that's because I think we all have internalized ageism. I remember, a couple of decades ago, when a very, very dear friend of mine turned 30, she had a major meltdown, and because she thought she was getting old. And that's not because of just her attitude, it's what the society has been telling her. And 3 weeks later, another friend of ours also turned 30, and he was very sad. He didn't, cry as much as my other friend, but he was very, very, very sad. And if you think back, and if you're thinking of when you turn 30, if you're older than 30, that really was not old. But the society told these two friends that they were getting older, and that meant something to them that really was not a positive thing. And if you're that way at 30, there's 40, there's 50, there's 60, there's 70, there's 80. And with the data that we're seeing, there will be 90 and 100 as well, right? And so how can we change that dynamic in our personal lives? So, and what do we bring to that ageism context because of our own internalized ageism? The last one is interpersonal ageism, and I kind of touched on this earlier. It's really all the things we say all the time you know at home, at the grocery store, at wherever, because we think sometimes we're being funny or sometimes we're being smart, but the things we say and do because of interpersonal ageism. So, having said that, I'd like to see what people have participants are saying in terms of what they see around them. One participant is saying that each stage of life prompts ageism. That is so true, Liz. Youngest workers are not hard. Yeah, true. I mean, the this notion that we have that younger workers are not hard workers, and that older workers don't understand trends in technology, changes in work systems, and even the middle in the middle, um, that people have too many distractions, that they're too distracted by parental responsibilities or other things that they might have. And so that is a great example, Liz. I'm so glad you brought that up. And then the Todd has to say that technology is changing rapidly, and there is a belief that older individuals do not adapt as well, similar to what Liz had mentioned earlier, Todd, and that's very true. And again, I don't have specific data to kind of support the statement that I'm about to make, but I find often, both from in terms of internalized ageism and also interpersonal ageism and systemic ageism, people are told and people believe, especially older adults, that they may not be able to keep up with technology. And that is a repeated thing. And I can tell you that my, mother, who's, over 79, is as good with technology as I am. And I'm not bad. Not bad at all. So there's something to be said that it's a stereotype that we kind of really um, put out there repeatedly, that older adults don't or can't keep up with technology. It could be true for some older adults, but that's not the case for everyone. And again, it's about generalizing and stereotyping, and that's one of the big barriers as well that we kind of build around groups of people that belong to a particular have a certain identity. Then employees employees not being considered for roles because they are perceived as not being adaptable to new skills or tools, similar to what Todd and Liz brought up earlier, and so ultimately being excluded from the applicant pool. That's true, and that happens a fair amount as well. And that happens across the board, not just um, um, within the workforce, where you need very specific skills. It also happens in places where you don't necessarily need very technical skills. Just because a person's older, you think they may not be able to adapt well to the culture of the organization or to the demands of the job. And then that's why a good interview within the workforce, and a good, comprehensive, thoughtful interview process can draw that out to see if there's a culture match, if there is the ability to hire someone who may not have the skills, but they have the aptitude to learn. And then you, as an employer, take on that responsibility of honing their skills to make sure that they are actually successful. Because when they're successful, you're successful. So that's just one thing. Then Catherine says there is a built-in expectation of retirement at a set age, regardless of ability. That is so true. It's almost like you're wondering, when is a person going to retire, when they're getting to a certain age, and without taking into taking into consideration whether that person's having a great time. There's nowhere close to retiring because they are still loving what they do and they're thriving. So, but yet people around them might be wondering, when they're going to leave, and that kind of, you project that when you think that way, because you might say something that might imply that, or subtly suggest that they should be, since they're getting up and kind of getting closer to retirement age, that they should actually start considering that. Even when you say, when are you planning to do it, sometimes that's a very personal thing. And if a person hasn't thought about it at all because they're really enjoying being in the workforce and being employed, then it kind of might really have the negative reaction, not, definitely an unintended reaction, but a negative reaction, um, because they weren't thinking about it, because they were um, not anywhere close to it. They were not ready for it. But then the negative reaction is because now they begin to feel like someone's telling them that they need to start thinking about retiring because they're getting to a certain age. And then here's a good question from Jim. It says, why do most employers prefer younger workers over older workers, and what are the reasons? I think one, we spent a fair amount of time just now, Jim, talking about how we think that younger workers have better skills. And also, and being very blunt, some employers prefer younger workers because they think they might have to pay a lot more for an older worker, primarily because they think that an older worker will not settle for a salary that's that a younger worker might settle for. That could be another reason as well. And we also talked about people thinking that older workers cannot adapt fast enough, or not, are unwilling to adapt to the demands of the job, to the culture of the organization. And I also think people just don't think about older adults as a demographic that they should seriously consider, because we're always trying to hire people who just have gotten out of college, or are in their 20s and 30s and 40s. But we don't really think that when you're hiring someone, that you think they might be 80% of your applicant pool are people who are 60 and older. So we don't expect that. We don't see that. We kind of then also are looking, the way we word our advertisements, and kind of the adverts to announcing the position. We don't we They might be words that alienate people, older adults, from even thinking about those jobs. All right, so I will move on, and here are some of the challenges that older workers face. So there are stereotypes. We talked about a few already, and ageism in the workplace. And that ageism really is, even when someone makes a comment about, well, I'm not, I'm not sure we know how this can be done. Let's ask X, because they must have seen this many a time, in the 30 years that they worked here. Well, in some cases, that could be a valid point because it could be a situation that's unique to the organization. It could be a situation unique to that position. But if you're asking that question only because that person is older and you think they might have had that experience without knowing at all if they did or not, that really is not very helpful to an older adult. It is really ageism when you don't actually include them in projects that they could be part of because you think they may not be able to deliver or contribute the same way that they did earlier. You're giving them fewer projects, or you are giving them projects that might seem like lighter lift. Those are all very subtle subconscious ways of showing ageism at the workplace. Unless the person has come to you and said, really, I'm kind of winding down right now, please give me projects that are not very heavy lifts. That's a whole different thing. But if you start making assumptions about them just because of their age and how you're interacting with them and how you're engaging them, that is ageism. Then another aspect of another challenge is health and disability issues impacting workability. So if you have someone as they're aging and they're not able to do certain things that they did in the past, is there something you could do to provide some upskilling opportunities? We talked about this earlier, to adapt their position in such a way that they can still do the job or do something that's slightly different but also still contributing in a very strong way to that team, to your workforce, to your bottom line, or any of those things. Then the need for flexible work arrangements and supportive policies, and we'll talk about this again later as well, but a lot of older adults are looking for flexibility in their jobs. As they're getting older, they may not feel the need, or they may not have the need to have to work 40 hours a week. So a lot of older adults, often, especially if they're 65 and older, look for positions that are temporary, that still might leverage their skill sets, that might still use their experience in a certain field, but for a lot fewer hours. But currently, at least, a few employers are beginning to look at this and kind of change how they recruit people and how they expect people to show up at the job. But not enough people are actually are looking at flexible work schedules, and they're not really changing how they consider uh, um, the number of worked hours at the workplace. Now, connected to older workers, there's also, and very specific to caregivers, there's about 166,000 family caregivers in Maine. They are people who are providing care to their loved ones, without any kind of compensation, without any kind of position that someone's hired them for, and they are actually providing all this care without um, um, any recognition. But they are older adults, and they are doing a whole set of things that really are what professionals could be doing or should be doing. They learn about caregiving, they learn about their loved ones medical needs, they learn about their um, um, physical needs, like how to really provide support that a direct care worker would be providing for support, and a whole range of other skills. And that's something that older adults do. And especially in our state, we know that there are a fair number of sandwich generation caregivers who are taking care of their older parents, but also taking care of their kids. A significant number of caregivers are working full or part-time, and these caregivers sometimes just don't want to leave their jobs and just need some flexibility so that they can still be employed, they can still do something that's meaningful while also taking care of their loved one, which they want to do and love to do, and find a lot of meaning in doing that. And then supporting employers with caregiving responsibilities, sorry, employees with caregiving responsibilities drive organizational performance. We know that when you lose an employee because they're not able to work, the expected 40 hours, and if there are no flexible hours provided to them, you actually lose institutional knowledge. And every time you have to hire someone new, from being in the workforce that you actually lose money because that position is not filled, and the amount of time you take to kind of to invest to hire someone new also takes resources. All right. Now, in terms of the business case for workers who are um, 50 and older, they are quite many in terms of what it does to the bottom line, what it does to the culture of the organization, what it does to what it can offer to younger employees, and what it does for older adults themselves who are feeling like they're contributing in a meaningful manner. So especially in our state, this first statement is very, very true. The 50 plus adults are, and the adult talent is a key ingredient in the high performing workforce within our state, because we have a very large number of older adults, and they could be the difference. Especially, we're not able to get people to fill positions across the state. 50 plus workers they bring experience, they bring engagement, they bring a certain maturity, they bring professionalism, a strong work ethic, loyalty, reliability, knowledge and understanding, and the ability to serve as mentors. Are there other things I should be adding to this list? Is the what a 50 plus adult could be bringing to the workforce? So if you have a comment about that, please put it in the comment section. Again, if there's anything else you want to add to this, in terms of making a business case for workers who are 50 plus, in addition to this list that's on the screen, are there other things we should be adding to that? I'll just give it a moment, and in the meanwhile, I'm going to read a message from Lisa D. It's tricky when people announce when they're retiring. If it is far in the future, because people tend to write them off and think they're less engaged. That is also very true. I think people avoid giving very long notices because they really think that people may not take them seriously anymore until they retire. Especially as kind of get the longer it is, the less they're likely to take you. The more likely to take you. Hang on, let me rephrase that correctly. The longer notice you give them, the longer your notice, the less likely they are to take you seriously in your job, because they know you're once foot out of the door already. Okay, it looks like there are no more things that people want to add to this list. So let's move on to the next one. Engaging older workers, and in terms of effective strategies. Um, there's this list, and I will come to another list later that's more specific. But broadly speaking, at a very high level, flexible work arrangements, and we talked about this earlier, are very, very important. Um, you People want flexible work arrangements because they might be family caregivers. We just talked about that. They might want flexible work arrangements because they want to live their older years doing a lot of other things apart from working. They might want to be able to travel a lot more. They might want to they just need a little extra money and they don't want to have to work 40 hours to just make that little extra money. So they rather work a part-time job that will give them that extra income on a monthly basis, and it could be just that, or it could be for a host of other reasons. Then lifelong learning, providing upskilling training, providing ongoing training, development opportunities, reskilling and upskilling among the 50 plus effectively. And this is something that we see a lot. Like, if you're an employer that is providing opportunities for upskilling and for reskilling. We talked about upskilling earlier, but we did not talk about reskilling. And reskilling is um, really helping people refresh their skills that they already have, but honing them just so that they're able to increase their productivity, that they are able to understand that slightly changed the nuances in terms of technology and other aspects. There might be new policies. Just making sure that people are up to date with the skills that they need to perform successfully in that job, and that's really about reskilling as well. Then mentorship programs, pairing older adults with younger employees for mutual learning. This is a huge one, and we push this also a fair amount. And this could also be sometimes, if you have an older adult, this is particular to the not-for-profit world, but it could also be for the for-profit world, where if you can bring on older adults, people who have actually worked within your workforce, within your organization, to come back as mentors, that's a great way to kind of really keep former employees engaged as volunteers. In some cases, doesn't have to be as volunteers all the time, but sometimes it could just be as volunteers. But you're really helping your younger employees as well to um, learn from someone who's had many years of experience at your organization. Then recognition and inclusion. So highlighting contributions and ensuring equal opportunities for growth. So that's another big one, and I cannot, you know, emphasize this enough. And for that reason, we'll come to this again at a future slide. But recognizing and including are really very important. Like recognizing and highlighting contributions that older adults make, and to ensure that there are equal opportunities for growth are equally important. Um, all right, let's move on to the next one. Um, Okay, before we do that, I'd like to ask another question here and see if there are any responses. Um, what are s- certain things that you are doing within your own organization to engage older adults or older workers, either as volunteers, either as employees, and what are you doing to um, kind of recognize the contributions of older adults? If you're doing anything in particular within your workforce, if you can just put them in the comment section, that would be great. And I'll take a quick sip of water here. Again, the question is, if you could provide an example from within your own organization to that of how you recognize the contributions of older adults, or what are you doing to engage older adults and to support them within your organization. I'll give it a few more seconds, and while you do that, I'll go to the next slide. Now, the effects of age positivity, people who embrace positive views about aging, and now this is really very much about looking at our internalized ageism, and it also impacts our interpersonal ageism and our systemic ageism as well. And So people who embrace positive views about aging, live 7.5 years longer, 7.5 years longer than those who are less positive, who have less positive perceptions of aging. Uh, um, People who embrace positive views about aging are 44% more likely to recover after experiencing a new disability. And they also experience less depression and anxiety. They have less cardiovascular disease and better brain health, and have fewer chronic conditions. And this is about your how you embrace um, aging, and how you have a positive outlook about aging. And because of your positive outlook of aging, you could live 7.5 years longer. You could be 44% more likely to recover from after experiencing a new disability. You could experience less depression and anxiety. You could have less cardiovascular disease and better brain health, and have fewer chronic conditions. Now, if you're talking about this very much from an individual perspective, or you're talking about this very much from a personal perspective, what are your own attitudes towards aging? I would love to hear your examples. So if you could please put them in the comment section. The prompt now is what are your personal attitudes towards aging? And while you put that, I'll look at the comments, your responses to the previous prompt. And I'll go to, and the prompt was, what are you doing to make your workplace more inclusive, or to highlight the contributions of older adults and older workers? And Kelly says that their visitor centers are run by older adults who know the area very well. That is a brilliant way of engaging older adults, who are local to where your organization is. That's excellent. Then an example from Liz is volunteer opportunities that allow for virtual participation are good for snowbirds, which often are older adults. That's also true. Like using technology that you have available to engage older adults, to make it easier for older adults to participate. Um, there are all sorts of platforms available these days to kind of really engage older adults wherever they are. And it's also very relevant in a state like Maine, which is very rural, and where the distances are, quite a bit between places. And people cannot come to Portland or Bangor or Augusta all the time, or Lewiston. Even Bangor is very far for many Mainers that live in Aroostook, Washington, and other parts of the state. And so using technology to make it more accessible is a great way to kind of include older adults and people with disabilities. There's another one from Kelly, in terms of highlighting the contributions of older adults. They are extremely valuable in their knowledge and contribution, and that is very true. And kind of recognizing and highlighting that is very important. And Todd works with an organization that has created an alumni network. That way, you're in keeping your former workforce, your former employees engaged, and that also shows your current workforce that there's a culture where you kind of celebrate people who have moved on to other things or have retired, but you still kind of stay connected because it's meaningful and that means something. All right. In terms of the next prompt that I had, something from Catherine, I feel and that the prompt was, what are your personal attitudes about aging? And I see that Catherine's the only one who's responded, and that is okay. I'm sure everyone has attitudes about perceptions about aging. And Catherine has to say that I feel blessed to be aging and fairly healthy. I've embraced the process, especially after participating in the Maine Council on Aging's Leadership Exchange on Ageism. And for those of you who do not know what the Leadership Exchange on Ageism is, I will strongly encourage you check it out, particularly as an employer, to really look into it and be and participate in one of the leadership exchanges. and they're not that very long. I don't exactly know how many sessions. I think there are 5 sessions over a 2 or 3 month period. But they are fantastic. They really help you understand how ageism is pervasive in our society, how you can actually self-regulate and kind of really do things that challenge and address ageism in our society, externally and personally as well. And I would really strongly encourage you to look at it. And that's with the Maine Council on Aging, the leadership exchange on ageism. And also, here's another comment in terms of what you know one's own perception about aging. I embrace the aging process. Having younger colleagues or members of the business community come to me for advice has made me realize how valuable experienced workers are in the workforce. That is true. It's very meaningful for an older adult, just like it is for any employee when a coworker or another employee comes to them seeking their input. And it is particularly important and valuable for an older adult because they experience it, generally speaking, experience it less and less, because people tend to go to people that are in their own age group and not necessarily to someone who's a bit older. Thank you for those comments. Now, moving on with the slideshow, sorry, with the slide presentation. Now, we also talked, and I mentioned this earlier, there's a direct relationship between happiness and aging. And many of you who are coming to a Chamber of Commerce presentation on ageism within the workforce may not have been expecting, me to talk about the relationship between happiness and aging, and also the effects of age positivity, and particularly how if you have a positive attitude towards aging, that you will live longer and you'll have lesser diseases and have better brain health, and that you're more likely to recover from a disability than someone who's not as happy or does not have a positive view about aging. You may not have been expecting me to go over this, but this is very relevant because, and so is this slide. Like, if you look at this, people as they get older tend to be happier, and this is the dip that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, that if you're around 50 and 60, here in this case it's 40 to 60, there's a dip. People are not very happy, or not as happy as someone who's 70 or 80 or 90. And that's very telling. And that's also, we bring this to our workforce as a colleagues, as employers, as people who might hire people. And that's very important for us to kind of lean into this a little bit and try to examine that, evaluate what this is for you. What does it mean to you personally? And are you, do you have a positive attitude towards aging or not? And also, are you, depending on how old you are, if you are in your 50s and you're not very happy, particularly around about aging, know that it'll get better. But at the same time, what are you doing to kind of really help in the right direction, to kind of work on that incline, so that you can connect the dots in a way that is meaningful to you. All right. Then here are some examples for how you can start doing things differently, how within the workforce. This is very specific to the workforce, and how you can start taking actions, both that are not very overt and things that are overt, to start making a change. And ultimately, as an employer, as a business owner, as a business, or someone who works within a business, there are things that could be done, should be done as an organization. And that has to do with policies, that has to do with recruitment strategies, all of these things. But more importantly, it starts with you as an individual, whether you own the company, whether you're an employee, whether you are um, uh, someone who's working temporarily. within that workforce, within that organization, the change still starts with you individually. And those here are some things you could be doing. Try using the terms older adult or older people, and instead of saying seniors, or like, you just refer to a person as an older adult or as an older person. Lean into aging as a positive thing. We often connect that, the aspect of aging, even when we talk about ourselves, in a negative manner. Try changing that to see and self-examine and look at all the ways you could be saying things that are negative about aging. So if you could lean into making that a positive thing, that is, would be really helpful. And best, and when it comes to what are all the things you say or do that really are not very positive when it comes to aging. All right, including yourself, it's always a great way to kind of really make it very, the conversation, the environment, the culture inclusive when you include yourself. And so saying, they're all aging, well, we're all aging is a better way to shift. And a better way to say it, and to shift to us instead of them, would just using inclusive terms like that would be really helpful, without making it too overt, but you're still being inclusive. Don't participate in sharing ageist messages, and please call people out for their ageist remarks. And there are many ways to do this. It's um, the best way, of course, is to pull them aside later, not do it in public, but let them know that that was probably an ageist thing to do or say in that context. And sometimes you might be calling someone out about something that they said about themselves. But still, if that's what, if you're someone that other people look up to and you're making remarks about yourself and your age in a negative way, you're setting an example, and people might actually see that as something that is condoned, and they might want to do it themselves. So steering away from that would be really helpful. Live your age, lead by example by embracing your own age and the accumulated skills, knowledge that come with aging. Be proud about whatever age you're at and kind of celebrate whatever learnings you have, whatever experience you have to that age, and knowing that there will be more as you kind of, get older. When you've met one older adult, you've met only one older adult. And this is something that a colleague of mine who works at the University of New England, at the gerontology department, Marilyn Gullucci, who always says, when you have met one older adult, you have met one older adult, which is simply to say, don't stereotype, don't generalize, because you might hire one older adult who might come with a certain skill set and is interested in doing something else. Doesn't mean that all the older adults are like that. Or you might hire an older adult who might be very inflexible about, trying to change, or trying to adapt with the changing needs of the organization, but that is one older adult. Similarly, on the positive front, you have an older adult who is just, wants to keep going on and on and on, and wants new projects, new challenges, but that might not be another older adult. They may not be interested in taking on new challenges. So when you have met one older adult, you have met one older adult. Build defenses against the ageism present in everyday culture. And you know what that is. You've seen it around you. You see it all the time around you. Try to explore what are the ways you could, defend against that form of ageism, or the ageism that you experience or see around you. Take every action to learn more about age bias. And this is very important, because learning about age bias um, is one of those things where it's internalized bias. You may not know that you have it. And it might be because of privilege, it might be because of social conditioning, it's because of your own culture. But if you carry this bias that you're not aware of, you will let that bias influence your decisions and your actions all the time, particularly about, getting older or aging, or ageism. For next steps, the number of older adults is projected to grow to grow substantially over the next decade, which offers an opportunity to build a more age diverse and inclusive workforce. So as we're getting older, as there are more older adults, and as we're finding it really hard to kind of get certain jobs filled in our state, older adults could meet that need. Um, and the best way to kind of really look at that and lean into that is to recognize recognize the growing importance of older adults in Maine's workforce. You, the key words here are recognize, evaluate, acknowledge, and encourage. So recognizing that the growing importance of older adults is one. Evaluate current systems and policies. That should be policies that prevent older adults from considering you as a strong employer. So what do you have in place that, the systems, do you have your interviews at a certain time that usually typically don't allow certain people to apply because they cannot, or to show up for an interview or take the interview because you just make it very difficult for them to even take the interview? Things like that, very specific things that could prevent people. So evaluate current systems and policies that prevent older adults from showing up in your world. Acknowledging the need for continued support and inclusive policies to maximize contributions of older adults. Again, acknowledging that they might have a need for continued support and that your that you could maximize the contributions of older adults by having inclusive policies, including systems in place. And the last one is encourage recognition of the value for older adults bring to the economy and to the community, um, and to the workforce. So recognize, evaluate, acknowledge, and encourage. Then any examples that you can give, and I'll keep going because I'm seeing that we're getting close to the end time here. But if there are any other examples you can give about things that you're doing to change this dynamic, that would be great. Just pop them in the comment section. Now, there I've highlighted engage and retain here because if you're talking about getting older adults into the workforce, if you don't already have them, um, outreach is an important aspect. How specifically reach out to older adults and older workers is going to make a big difference. Or do your ads say things that will resonate with someone who's an older adult as well, not just younger applicants. Hiring is of course important, how you hire someone. And then the next one, the most important aspects within this kind of um, outreach, hire, engage, retain, celebrate kind of cycle is the engagement and retention. You might be able to reach out to folks, you might be able to hire people, but if you can't engage them and if you cannot retain them in a meaningful way, then you're actually spending more energy on this, um, and losing money, losing resources, losing employees, which can be easily avoided, and celebrating the achievements. And we kind of went over that already. I think it's very important. All right, and then other things to consider, and these are very specific examples. Tailor the position to what the person is looking for. If they want to just do X and not Y, can you build that position in a way that that's possible, without saying, oh, now we have to hire someone else to do the other thing. But there might be another older worker who wants to do this other thing that this person doesn't want to do. Unless you explore it, you will not know. But tailoring positions, I think, will get more older adults in the workforce, and it'll also keep more older adults in the workforce. Hours, I think we mentioned this already. Rearrange what you think about hours and work hours, because for an older adult, if they're coming back to the workforce, hours are very important to them, when they can and cannot work. Flexibility is key. The more flexible you are, the more attractive you become as an employer. And how that flexibility shows up, it really depends on your conversation with the employee and how you can make the position flexible by also meeting your organizational needs, and the goals of that position. Unique roles, we've talked about this already: mentorship, responsibility, visibility. Sorry, visibility and non-visibility. Some older adults may want a position that has more visibility, and others just may not want to be in any of those positions that involve visibility, because they may have done it for 40 years, 30 years in their careers, and they don't want to do that anymore. Speaking openly, I think if you are doing things to hire, engage, retain older workers, you should proudly talk about it, so that your organizational culture really shows that you're celebrating that, and that's a way of celebrating, the having older adults in your workforce. The policy review, we mentioned that already, so I'll not go over that again. And the last one is lead by example. This is very important. The leader of your organization, and if you are a leader within your organization, it'd be really important for you to kind of show your colleagues, the rest of your organization, some of these things that are on this list, in fact, how you talk about ageism, how you talk about older employees, how you celebrate older employees all the time. And that makes a big difference. All right. And then here's a resource from AARP for employers. It's the employerportal.aarp.org. Again, it's employerportal.aarp.org. I hope you will check it out, because there's some really good resources for employers there. That's it. Thank you very much for your time and giving me this opportunity to share some of the work and some of our research at AARP, and also kind of talk about what we're finding in Maine in terms of perspectives on aging and how we can change it. How we can change things, and have the workforce be a more inclusive, welcoming place for older adults. Yes, I'd be happy to share the slide deck. Catherine, I will have our colleagues from the chamber take care of that. They have a copy of the presentation, so I'd be fine with them sharing it with you. There's a question also: is there an industry that you witness is particularly prone to experiencing ageism in the workforce and workplace? I'm not sure I can point out to a particular industry. Every industry has it in one form or the other. If you're in the media, if you're in the acting world, people don't get roles anymore. They don't get called if people are getting older. If you are in the medical world, unless you're a highly specialized surgeon or doctor, you don't have as many opportunities as you used to earlier. You don't have headhunters coming for you the same way they did 20 years before or so. Same thing with educators. Same thing with other fields of work. So I can't really pinpoint one or two.
See,
All
I
right.
think we another question here, Noel. So, how do you address the requirements, skills of a role while being respectful and mindful of engaging in the discrimination? So maybe that's a broader question, but any thoughts there?
Yeah, but it's a very, very important question. I think the bottom line is, I think it's very important to ask yourself: will what we are doing right now, one, make it easier for the employee to meet our organizational goal, our bottom line, right? And if it does, the answer is no. It's basically, what you have to do. But if you feel like you're doing something that really is counterintuitive to your organizational goals, to how you build a culture, you will know that it doesn't feel right.
Mhm.
But in that case, you really have to ask yourself, is the accommodation you're making for the older adult, is that, or someone with a disability, or someone with a special need, or or linguistic need, or whatever that is, it might cost you financially, but that is the right thing to do, because ultimately, if you want to create a culture that is inclusive, that celebrates the diversity, that and the diverse abilities that people bring, that I think is more important. And also, it's also ultimately the kind of workplace work culture you'd want to create anyways, because people who might not need that accommodation may actually see that, if I ever needed that, this is a workplace that would really step up to do the right thing.
Mhm.
Right. And so it is both there. I think you really have to, like, it's really case by case, but don't do it in a way that, it's not sincere, but also don't do it just for the bottom line, because ultimately it's about creating a culture that is sustainable, that would then yield the results in the long run, though you may not see it right away.
Mhm. That's a good point. And it's something that I just observed throughout your presentation is kind of this, maybe this can also pertain, I think, to our entire series here of ideas, but like honesty, willingness to open the conversation. Um, because, like you said, for example, your answer to that previous question, bottom line, understanding that, some of these um, services and trainings that or more ways of creating a more accessible workplace may have financial, be tied financially, to your organization, but then combining that with your morals, right? And so it's so situation by situation, um, but there's a way for you to address that in an open and welcoming manner when having a conversation with a potential employee or current employee. And I think that's kind of like the bottom line here, right?
Correct.
Being honest and being open.
True. And trying sincerely.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Language is important. Um, well, great. Well, thank you so much. You have many people thanking you for your presentation, and as you mentioned, referencing, I believe it was Catherine's message. We will be providing that presentation that you sent to us um, this morning before the event. That will come in a follow-up message to everyone who registered for the event today. Um, so yes, thank you so much, Noël, for your time and your expertise this morning. You answered everyone's questions and insights so carefully, and you provided us all with important action items and resources following today's training, which is extremely important. Um, and I will also thank my chamber colleague, Riley Legier, the man behind the curtain, here pressing play and go on today's presentation. Thank you so much, Riley, for helping to produce another virtual event here at the Chamber. Another shout out to, of course, both Springborn Staffing and Visit Portland for their generous support of this series throughout the season. The Chamber and our community couldn't have these vital conversations without your support. Of course, thank you for everyone attending this morning and engaging in the chat with us today and throughout the season. If you're interested in learning more about today's topic and continuing the conversation with Noël, as I mentioned, be sure to check your email for a follow-up message with the appropriate contact information, the slide deck from today's presentation, and links to additional resources. We look forward to seeing everyone again on Tuesday, April 8th, 9 a.m. for the next episode of Ideas, where we'll hear from Carly Ott, Senior VP and Senior Architect for Global Operations at a Fortune Top 50 company, and a national advocate for our neurodivergent community outside and inside the workplace. Just to tell you a little bit more about that presentation, following an autistic disorder diagnosis at 28, Carly became an active member of her organization's employee resource groups and serves on multiple boards, including the Autism Society of America. She'll lead an engaging training on inclusive language, support services, talent acquisition, and provide an overview of what has worked and why. So join us on April 8th to learn about why and how large Fortune Top 50 companies, among many others, are prioritizing creating a more welcoming workplace and recruitment process for our neurodivergent workforce. All right, everyone, thank you so much for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you again next month here on another episode of Ideas.